Hello, and welcome to Organ Miniatures, a weekly video series aimed at demystifying the organ. I am your host, Hlebinsky. Let's begin. Last week, we learned a little bit about what organ music looks like. The next two topics that we're going to cover are how organists know which manual to play on at any given time, and which stops to use. We're going to go through only one topic at a time. However, there is some overlap. Sometimes the stops that you have available will dictate which manual we'll play on, and at other times the presence or absence of other manuals will impact which one you can use. This week we'll figure out which manual to use. To start off, let's take a quick look at the different manuals that we have at our disposal. Organs may have anywhere from 2 to 8 manuals, but most that you will find have 2 to 3. Each manual has a specific group of stops that gives it a complete and balanced sound, independent of the other manuals. On 2 manual instruments, we generally have 1 louder manual and 1 softer manual. On 3 manual instruments, we typically have 2 that are softer and 1 that is louder. Each manual has its own name, but these vary from country to country. In the United States, our most common are the swell, the grate, and the choir, and they are typically in that configuration from top to bottom. Now, as we look at this instrument, you'll see that we actually have 4 manuals here. The top manual is the antiphonal, and it controls only the pipes that are found at the back of the church. Moving down from there, we have the swell, the grate, and the choir. So, how do we go from there to knowing which one to use? This is where it can start to get complicated. Now, if we're lucky, the composer will tell us exactly what he or she wants. The more recent the music, the more likely that the composer will tell us exactly which manual should be used when. Of course, if we're looking at music from another country, for instance, from France, then we have to decipher which manual is intended. In this case, the récite that is listed refers to the swell, and the grande orgue refers to the grate. Now, if the composer hasn't provided helpful directions, then our next hope is that the editor of the music included them, as in this example from Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, if both the composer and the editor don't give us instructions, then we're pretty much on our own. I'll use Bach as an example again. Bach almost never gave any indication for which manual to play. At this point, the organist is free to use his or her judgment as to what will make the piece sound best, which is where we start to overlap with next week's discussion. When we aren't told which manual to use, then often we decide based on the stops that we're using. Finally, what exactly does the organist do when the manual suggested doesn't exist on the instrument he or she is playing? This comes down partly to stops and partly to the overall volume of the manual. For instance, if the music says to play something on the choir, but you have a 2 manual instrument with only a grate and swell, then you would probably play the choir part on the swell. Of course, if you're supposed to play 1 hand on the swell and 1 hand on the choir, then obviously one of those is going to have to go on the grate, and you just have to make sure at that point that the sound is balanced, which is usually possible. So there's your brief overview as to how organists choose which manual to use. So right now you're probably going, that makes sense, or this is so confusing it's making my head hurt. I certainly hope it's the former, not the latter. These topics that we're covering right now are things that organists spend years studying so that they are able to quickly adapt to any new instrument. So don't feel bad if things don't make sense, and certainly don't be overwhelmed if you think you might want to learn to play the organ. As I've said before, you learn to play the organ little by little, and these videos are really just meant to give you a broad overview of everything that an organist has to deal with, which of course, unfortunately for you, means that you get a lot of information thrown at you in a short period of time. However, if you do have any questions about anything you've seen here today, please feel free to ask in the comments, and I will do my best to answer each question. I'll see you next week.